Okay, let's watch this.
Once all the happy talk was over and all the red carpets were rolled back up, President Trump gets on the Air Force One, starts heading back here. And by the way, this ugly thing is still waiting for him. It never went away. And that is, what is he going to do about the Iran war? That is not going anywhere. The 10-year bond yield has now gone.
The Strait of Hormuz are still closed. We're now in, 2 months and a half of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. A recession is probably guaranteed at this point, together with inflation. I'd say just another month to be sure, and then Republicans are absolutely fucked in the midterms. Just wait to what you see what happens to gas prices in the United States.
Above 4.5. The stock market is not doing as great. The oil prices are now starting to tick back up because all of these ticking time clocks I keep telling you about are real. And you can only manipulate them so many times with words or social media posts before they start interdicting into that. And we are rapidly approaching that point now, to where physical scarcity and can no longer be covered over by release of strategic petroleum reserves, and those are going to have impact on the American people and on our allies throughout the world, and you just can't hide it anymore. So President Trump is now under increasing pressure, especially now that Beijing is off the table. What is he going to do? There are two main options that I see here. We'll talk about those in a second. There's also others who see two options, a little different than the ones I'm thinking of here, but the bottom line is none of them are good for President Trump. Now, one of the conversations that President Trump had shortly after the Beijing meeting, when everybody already started turning back the focus onto Iran, even before he had left Beijing, and that was with Bret Baier at Fox News, who asked him, for Fox News, I got to give cred, they asked him some pretty unpleasant questions that President Trump doesn't want to answer. One of the key ones is, did you underestimate Iran's ability to suffer?
Did you underestimate the pain tolerance that Iran has?
I didn't underestimate any.
Yes, you did. You did. You thought Iran was going to collapse in 3 days. Of course, you underestimated them. You never thought you'd be in this situation. You're an absolute idiot on Iran. You made a presidency-destroying mistake on Iran.
Anything. We hit them unbelievably hard.
And what's so infuriating is the Republicans are going to pay in the midterms because of your stupidity.
Look, we left their bridges. We left their electricity capacity. We can knock that all out in 2 days. 2 days.
Yeah, and in 2 days they can turn the entire Gulf into one big flaming mess that no oil will come out of for years. That's what yes, you can destroy the entire Middle East if you want to, Trump. Yes. Why is that good? Why are you mentioning that?
Everything. We left Cargill, and other than, I said, hit it, except for the valves where the oil comes out. Because when you hit that, that means you're going to lose a little oil. But one thing is happening, amazingly. Ships are floating up to Texas and Louisiana, and they're going to Alaska, and they're loading up with oil like we've never seen before.
Classic thing with Trump here. No one asked.
Thing is, right now, the United States makes about as much oil as it consumes, except that we need the light type. We need the heavy crude. That's it, that we bring into Texas to refine. And the light type crude we export. And with disruption in the oil market, we are still dependent on oil imports to a big extent. And gas prices are going to go up.
Ask you, did you blow up a bunch of stuff on the ground in Iran, and are you selling oil in Texas? That wasn't the question that was asked. The very important question that was asked, did you underestimate Iran's ability to endure suffering? Did you underestimate them? And that is essential. Everybody knew that we could drop a lot of bombs, that we could fire a lot of missiles, that we could hit a lot of targets and kill a lot of people. That was never a question. The very much issue at stake, and the very big question that needs to be answered, it should have been answered before one bomb was even authorized to fall, is who can outlast the other? Can Iran endure the pain that these bombs will inflict longer than we can endure the pain?
No. The one question, the one thing that should have been addressed is, how do you deal with the closure of Strait of Hormuz? You have a military force ready to go day one to go in and open the Strait of Hormuz. That's the only way you do it. And if you don't have the political will to build up the 300,000 troops you need to secure the Iranian coast and the tens of thousands of casualties that might be necessary, then you don't attack Iran. End of story. The one thing you never do is bomb Iran's supreme leader with no plan at all to deal with the closure of Strait of Hormuz. That's the one thing you never do unless you want to end your presidency as a U.S. president.
From the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, President Trump answers like he always does. First of all, no, of course not. I never make a mistake. Everything I do is right, and it always works. And then he starts manufacturing some stuff. And I mean, we'll just look at that thing he said there about, Texas and Louisiana and Alaska and all that kind of stuff. There is some truth to that. We certainly have been exporting a lot of oil. But folks, if anybody understands how the oil system actually works in the United States, it works at glacial speed. I mean, a sloth and a snail are lightning compared to the way that things actually work. You can't just turn on a tap and say, all right, well, we've been producing at X number of barrels, and now we'll just turn it on, and now we'll be 2X or something like that. it takes a long time to get to change the amount of oil produced. So if you're changing the amount of oil distributed and exported, then that means you got to get it from somewhere else.
It's not only does it take a long time to change the amount of oil produced, the futures market is signaling that oil prices are going to collapse in the second half of the year. So no one's going to drill for more oil when low oil prices are in the future. And that's a consequence of manipulating the futures market to keep oil prices down, is that no new supply comes online to deal with the current shortage we have. So this new production is not going to save us.
I.e. the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So that is what has enabled us to have all of these empty cargo vessels come and fill up, these VLCCs and other kinds of vessels, because we've been giving them our strategic petroleum reserves. So terrific, great for those oil companies. They get to sell a lot of oil, and they make a whole lot more money in the short term. Of course, the price of oil is also higher, so they even make more. So they're swimming in cash at the moment, but they are also very keenly aware that this is a spike. And they know that the fundamentals underneath that don't augur well for long-term production. That those are separate issues there. So I'm sure they'll rake in all the cash they can now, but they're already looking, 12, 18, 24 months beyond this and trying to figure out what they can do next. President Trump doesn't think 12 months down the line on anything. We're lucky if we can get him to think 12 minutes down the line, not even 12.
I will say that if it's a worst-case scenario where the Middle East goes up in flames, immediately those oil companies will change what they're doing. They'll go, oh no, this is now permanent. They immediately start all kinds of projects that'll come in line in a year or two. But in terms of next year, we'd be next 2 years probably, completely fucked.
Days, I don't think. And that's what the case is here. And so he is, again, just detached his mind from the hard question, the real question here. Because as Joe Camp has told you on our show, who was in the administration during a lot of these deliberations, President Trump knew the likelihood that Iran would attack our bases, knew that they would seize the Strait of Hormuz, and knew that that was going to cause a lot of economic hardship. So he had all the information he needed beforehand.
But he believed the Iranian regime would collapse. And if the Iranian regime collapses, well, they might hit a few of our bases in the first 24 hours, 48 hours. But then we will have regime change, a U.S. puppet state in Iran, and that's worth it. And they can't close the Strait of Hormuz if the government collapses in 48 hours, can they? That's what Trump was thinking. It would just be another Venezuela, easy operation, big success. His ego gets inflated even more.
And so any rational thinking person would have been able to say, all right, who can suffer the longest? The Iranians who went through the 8-year Iran-Iraq war?
No. You had Trump telling the press that he told UK Prime Minister Starmer that this would be over in less than a week, in a couple of days. And if he is honestly completely convinced it'll last only one weekend, why would he consider all these long-term things about who can suffer more? That's not even on the table. I mean, the Iranian government was going to collapse in 3 days. Why worry about who can suffer more?
All the decades of sanctions we put on top of them, or us who go crazy if there's a 20% or 20-cent rise in gas prices, whatever, causes all kinds of political problems here at home. Doesn't take a genius to figure out the answer to that, but President Trump didn't want to hear any of that. He only wants to hear what he wants. And when people tell him good news, he loves that. And when they ask him hard questions or give him news he doesn't want to hear, he just pretends that the question wasn't asked and that the substance isn't there. But it still is. Well, in that same interview, he went back to what can only be described as his security blanket, kind of like Linus and Lucy and Charlie Brown and all that. And that is, hey, you know what? No matter what question you ask, I can always answer it with my go-to. We are the most incredible military power in history.
We have the greatest military in the world. We proved that with Venezuela. We proved it with Iran. Iran's wiped out militarily. It's just a question of time. And,
no, they just have 70% of their missiles yet. And some, according to some reports, 90% of their missiles yet. I don't know if I believe that one. I think they've used a lot and we've destroyed some. So I'm more in the 70% left. But that's a hell of a lot more than we have left. We've used 50% of our Tomahawk missiles, for example. So, yeah, no. U.S. military capabilities in the region have been weakened more than Iranian military capabilities in the region.
we gave them a break by stopping a little while. We have a blockade. They have no boats are going in. No boats are even thinking about it. We talked about it today. It's very interesting, but they're impressed. We have a great military.
But the most important thing to take away from this right here is Trump is still doing we won bigly type thing. He's still portraying Iran as a win. And as long as he's doing that, he's not going to have the negotiations that are necessary for this to end. And those negotiations are basically Trump surrendering to Iran. Trump agreeing to Iranian demands. And that's the end game in 2-3 months from now, when the rest of the world just forces him to. Right now, he's just, the rest of the world is going to start screaming on oil in 2-3 months. And Trump will be forced to agree to want what Iran wants. For now, though, he's going to do this because he needs to do this politically. He's going to keep pretending. He's acting for the Asmongold of the world. Let's say the Asmongolds of the world, the people that are completely uninformed about the realities in Iran and think that America is actually winning or is in a good position. So people as uninformed as Asmongold, that's who Trump is catering to. And so you're going to have those two groups, Trump pretending that we won and Asmongold consuming this this complete nonsense that we won, right up until the rest of the world comes together and says, no, you actually lost. Now surrender to Iran. And I'm dying to see Asmongold's reaction at that time.
We have the greatest military we've ever had, but we have the greatest military anywhere in the world.
Anywhere in the world. We're better than China. We're better than Russia. All these things they got, sure. I know that China has a shipbuilding capability that's 200 times, not percent, 200 times bigger than ours, and that their missile inventories are profoundly larger, that their industrial capacity to make them and sustain
200 times the shipbuilding capabilities of the United States. That's what China has. And Russia's probably 10 times more. On average, that's how it works out. China's a superpower now, the global superpower. It's just, in terms of the manufacturing base is what determines the superpower in the long run. It has it. We outsourced our prosperity to China. Until we rebuild it back, it takes a while for that reality to set into the world. But it will.
them over time is orders of magnitude practically.
Yeah, as an example, we, United States, used to have the monopoly on refining rare earths. We were the people that refined rare earths. Then we outsourced it to China. It's literally outsourcing our prosperity to another country.
It's way, way larger than ours. Of course, Russia is now somewhere up around 2 million active forces. And their industrial capacity is just off the charts compared to where it was when that war started. I mean, sure that they both dwarf anything that we can do, but you know what? Don't worry about that. I said we're the greatest in the world. And he says in that same clip there, we devastated the Iranian side. I mean, militarily, they're all but defeated. Now, one wonders, is that part all made up in his mind, or is he getting information from some of his commanders who say stuff like this? Admiral Cooper, who's the commander of Central Command, says that 90% of Iran's defensive industry was destroyed after the campaign. This was just a couple of days ago, as yesterday.
This Asmongold, this is type of stuff you'll love. Yeah. Remember when Asmongold was saying, "Oh, we're destroying all their launchers; they won't be able to launch anything anymore." Yeah, at least he stopped saying that.
Yesterday, as a matter of fact, and one has to wonder, what are you talking about? Because there's been all kinds of leaked information and intelligence that says what is self-evidently true, because we can see the results of it on the ground where Daniel Davis Deep Dive lives. We always care about the truth. We look at what people say, we read their comments, but if it doesn't line up on the ground, we go with what the ground says before we'll go with what it says here. When you hear him say, oh yeah, we're intercepting, what was the other claim here, that over 90% of their missiles are intercepted, and now they love this 90% number.
Even Israeli media, towards the end of the hot phase of the war, was admitting that 80% of Iranian missiles were getting through, the ballistic missiles, because Israel's stock of interceptors was so depleted.
Now, 90% of Iran's defensive industry has been destroyed. Well, then why do we have a ceasefire? President Trump said in those clips we just played there that, we just gave them a little break. You don't give your enemy a break. When the only thing you're going to break is their neck.
If 90% of Iran's military capabilities had been destroyed or depleted, they wouldn't still control the Strait of Hormuz. Just saying. That's the obvious thing. And if the Navy was completely destroyed, like Trump has said multiple times, they wouldn't control the Strait of Hormuz. These are just lies.
With your boot, if you're pressing in, if you're winning, if you're in a war, and forget about any of the rationale or the morality or anything else, in a war where you're trying to kill people and destroy them and accomplish a political objective and an outcome using military force, if you're 90% of the way there, nobody will ever take their foot off the gas. And we didn't. The only time that you're going to, from an alleged position of superiority, that you're going to let your foot off the gas and go for a ceasefire is because you are running out of gas. And that's what it was. In this case,
50% of our Tomahawks used up. 50%. And we actually need those. We just watched videos on how Russia's on the verge of expanding war into Europe. How are we going to deal with that when we've wasted 50% of our Tomahawks on Ukraine? On Iran. And what about Taiwan? We're so low on ammunition.
Running out of gas means we were running out of missiles, offensive and defensive missiles. We were running low of them. And we could see it was not having the impact on there. Intelligence and reports have revealed that at least 30 of the 33 missile batteries and missile defensive structures that are underground along the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman, the forward shorelines of the Iranian side, are back fully operational. And many of them were still partially operational before that. Most of them weren't even touched. So that is self-evident. And those are just the ones that are along the waterways. There's dozens more that go throughout the country that, of course, is as big as most of Western Europe. So 90% of that, there's no way on God's earth it's been destroyed because they foresaw all this and they build them underground so that you can't destroy them. Remember I told you the Yazd?
Yeah, mountains are a pretty effective way to protect military facilities. Just build a tunnel into the mountain and they're safe from everything except bunker buster bombs, and even those we have in limited quantities.
Facility was hit at least 7 times, and that was in March. One of the other facilities was apparently hit 22 times. It's now back operational, fully operational. So those are the realities here. But you see, President Trump isn't dealing with reality. He's dealing with preference. This is just what I would like to see. It's what I'd like to have. And in fact,
You say it even more simply, wishful thinking. Trump wants to make believe he's in the world where his political career isn't over, that he is still going to have a successful presidency and is going to leave a legacy behind. Unfortunately, and I honestly do think this is sad because he had potential to actually leave behind a meaningful legacy. Unfortunately, he bombed Iran's supreme leader and threw everything away.
it goes a little bit further. It's not just that I have the greatest military. It accomplishes everything I want. Now, I don't know if he's listening to Admiral Cooper there. I don't know if other people are telling him all these things are going good or not. But here's what he said on Air Force One on the way back.
I had a total military victory, but the fake news, guys like you, write incorrectly. You're a fake guy. Guys like you write about incorrectly. We had a total military victory. We knocked out their entire Navy. We knocked out their entire Air Force. We knocked out all of their anti-aircraft weaponry. We knocked out all of their radar. We knocked out all of their leaders, number one, and then we knocked out all of their leaders in the 2nd Division, and we knocked out numerous of their leaders in the 3rd Division.
Yes, but you accomplished nothing. The regime hasn't changed. The son of the old supreme leader is now the new supreme leader, and he probably hates America a lot more than before. The military is largely intact. They still control the Strait of Hormuz, and we're fucked. The world economy is fucked. And it's going to keep getting fucked until the rest of the world comes together and forces you to surrender to Iran. And that's the end of it. Or you can just escalate things, entire Middle East goes up in flames, and your presidency ends even sooner. But if you don't do that, then you can draw this out another 2-3 months and continue pretending that you won and pretending you're actually an actual viable president for 2-3 months before reality is forced upon you. So, do you want to escalate and end your presidency now, or keep pretending for another 2-3 months?
They're very confused. We've had a total victory, except by people like you that don't write the truth. You know, you should write. I actually think it's sort of treasonous what you write, but you and the New York Times and CNN, I would say.
Now, I'm probably on the treasonous list because I agree with them. This is your ego not wanting to accept reality that your presidency is over.
The worst.
Of course, if you've seen some of my posts on X when he had said that previously, it's not the first time he's made that comment about it being treasonous if you report the truth, meaning if you say anything besides his version of what he's talking about here, you're treasonous. And again, we always go back.
Millions will starve next year because of the fertilizer shortages right now. And Trump is responsible for that. He's killed millions. It's already set in stone. 2.5 months now, fertilizer missing from the Gulf. Even if it opened now, it's too late. Millions will starve.
Living on the ground. So when you say that all of their Air Force and all their air defense has been taken out, they got none left. Then explain this chart to me. This is as of April. This is just as of early April. So more than a month
This is why I like deep dives. This is a nice chart. This is our losses.
ago. Now, this was during the active phase of combat, so I don't think any of these numbers have gone up. But you see all of these aircraft that were damaged or destroyed. That seems like a pretty high number to somebody who has no air defense capability. Just saying that off the top of the case here. But the rest of it is also equally untrue. But who is in control of the Strait of Hormuz today? Who is in control?
I'm fairly certain that Iran's buffed off its anti-air defenses in the weeks of the truce. So that graph is going to get worse if it goes hot again.
The Strait of Hormuz on the 28th of February. Who was in the control of it on the 1st of
You might have people trying to prepare, but it's just too much. You're going to have 20-30% missing harvest, and prices will go up, And in places where they're really poor, they will starve. Any place that's trying to do relief effort, food is still going to be more expensive then. And so then relief organizations will be able to buy less of it. And the poorest places, the war-torn places where relief agencies can't really go, people will starve in huge numbers.
March. Who was in control of it on the 27th of February? Oh, that would be no one. It was wide open. It was unencumbered. Nobody stopped.
I haven't checked wheat futures, but I can already tell what they are. It's going to be. It was going to be the same situation that it was back in 2009. Again, they can't have drastic changes in the futures market because it would bring down the financial system. So
Let's build an arsenal.
The change is going to be about what it was in the oil's futures market, wheat futures, which is a spike up, then capped. We can wheat futures. Yep. So going up a little bit, but since the war started, right here is where the war started, just a tiny bit higher, and just lately, it's nowhere near where it should be with all the missing fertilizer. They've put a cap on it, just like oil.
Oh, all the commerce, all the oil traffic, all the natural gas, all the derivatives, everything was free to come and go. Everything was working fine until
Actually, now that I thought about
we chose to start a war. And now that we can't win that war militarily, and because of our actions, we put Iran into an existential fight to where their biggest article of leverage was the Strait of Hormuz, which they firmly grasp and have never let go, and we don't have the capacity to open that fist. You see, we've drained huge portions of our arsenals of the most important missiles we need for our national security. JASSM long-range cruise missiles, Tomahawk cruise missiles, the THAAD interceptors, the long-range interceptors, the PAC-3, the most modern interceptors we have. If you saw Ted Postal on our show today, the amount of missiles those things are actually shooting down is quite low, but at least they do something. And we're running out of even that, which means that later on they could fire even older stuff that might otherwise be easy to intercept. But if we don't have any missiles, nothing's going to be intercepted and everything's going to get through. That's the reality. That's why we had the ceasefire, because we could not stop their missiles. We're running low of our own offensive and defensive missiles. We're not knocking out these missile cities. And you can see when you fire it 7 times and another one 22 times, and it's not knocking them out, then you can see you're literally wasting your ammunition. You're just blowing up a bunch of rocks on the side of a granite.
This is not the best of grass, but this is what I had back when I was blogging. It's a good example of what's going on now. What happened in 2009. See, right here in you had explosion of open interest. You see, it goes up and then it hits a wall. And this is amount of open interest, amount of paper contracts. It explodes. And then the price skyrocketed. Okay, well, I need a better graph. That I shouldn't show that. I need a better graph.
And you're just depleting your inventories further and further down, and you're not diminishing the enemy capabilities. And now we see that. Everybody sees that. Russia sees that. China sees that. Seems like the only people that don't see it are those in Washington, D.C. Well, they're going to have to see something pretty soon because, again, that clock is ticking. Trump loves to avoid hard choices and hard decisions, but he's running out of time, and he's not going to be able to do that much longer. Now, one of the other things I think is important at this point to discuss, we talked a little bit about the origins of this war. We've had Joe Kent on the show, who was in the government at the time, and he said, listen, it was the Israelis. It was the Israelis. You remember, by accident, you had Secretary of State Marco Rubio on, I want to say, the 3rd or 4th day of the war, inadvertently admit that, well, Israel was going to attack, and we couldn't let them attack alone, so we had to go in. That was the imminent threat, the imminent reason why we had to go at that point. Then, of course, he tried to walk it back later, but only after he realized, oops, I said the silent part out loud. So we've known that. It's self-evident that there was no American interest at stake. We've told you categorically that this claim of an imminent threat of nuclear weapons is absurd. There was none because we've allegedly destroyed it, obliterated it in 2025. So it doesn't it's not a ghost and it just rises up and now it's 2 weeks away from a nuclear bomb, even though Secretary Wright said it again just in testimony this
Okay,
week.
I'm going to do the example again one more time. So let me try to. So let's go here. This is where, well, there was a bad harvest, right, at the end, middle of 2008. And the price went up, but then they put a cap on it. And they did it by selling, you see, that's the amount of open interest going up and up. And they kept this down. Now, what that does is that at the beginning of 2011, that is when you had the riots in Egypt. because there was an explosion in food prices after that, because they and that's the same situation we're in now. There's going to be, February 2011. They're putting a cap on the rise in prices, and it's going to explode later towards the end of the year. And there's going to be the same scenario of, in February next year, riots across the world about food.
Absurdly, embarrassingly, it's still physically impossible, but I guess that's not a problem. Well, in one of the interview with Sean Hannity of Fox News, President Trump was asked about some issue about what we do or don't need from Iran, but then he gets into why we did this, and he's going to tag off a number of countries he thinks helps. Who do you suppose is at the top of that list?
We don't need it at all.
We don't need it at all.
We don't need it at all.
Fair enough. So,
I mean, you could make the case, like, why are we even, we're doing it to help Israel and to help Saudi Arabia and to help Qatar and UAE and, Kuwait and other countries, Bahrain.
it also helps China.
We're actually, I told them today, I said, we're helping you. And we're helping you in another way because I don't think China wants Iran to have a nuclear weapon either. I said, they're stone cold crazy. You don't need them having a nuclear weapon either.
What did he say? What did he say?
Well, he's not going to respond too much. He's a pretty cool guy. He's not going to say, oh, gee, that's a good point.
Yeah, he wasn't, if he was not being tactful, he would have said, then why did you bomb the supreme leader that issued a fatwa against nuclear weapons? Because I think that's opening the door for Russia, for Iran getting nuclear weapons.
What's he going to do?
I mean,
What a wonderful point.
You think he agreed?
Yeah, I think
that was the
I think
impression.
I don't think he wants them to. No, he would like to see it end. But he's been good about it,
Yeah, I have no doubts that China would like to see it end. Nobody wanted this war, but I say nobody. I stand corrected, as he just revealed there. Israel wanted this war.
Yes, you can't say no one wanted this war when Israel definitely wanted this war.
Saudi Arabia didn't want the war. UAE didn't want the war. Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait. Nobody wanted this war. Iran definitely didn't want the war. Who did? Israel. Benjamin Netanyahu. And he convinced Trump to go in there. There were zero American national security issues even at play. Nothing was at stake. I mean, Iran, I think that their military budget annual for a long time has been...
It was an unforced error on Trump's part. There was no reason to bomb Iran's supreme leader. Not doing it would have cost America nothing. It was just Trump thinking he was doing Netanyahu a favor, just like the favors he's done in past, and just thought he could just walk away from it afterwards.
I don't know, something like $11, $12 billion a year. Ours is about $1 trillion a year. So it dwarfs it in every way you can imagine. So they don't pose a threat to us, and they never did. So the only reason why you would go to war with somebody would be because somebody else benefits, or one of your friends cajoled you and insisted, I don't know, tricked you into it, just talked you. I don't know what it was. But only in Israel, and I've shown you some of their media, that they still think that even the 2025 war was worth it. They think this one was worth it. They just don't think it's done yet. So Dennis Centrinowitz is one of his ex-posts again today is reiterating Israel does not want a negotiated settlement. They consider any negotiated settlement a bad deal, and they don't want it. They want it to go back to combat because they don't care about all these international deals. They're not worried.
They don't care about oil prices and the world economy. If they give some dominance in the Middle East, then that's great for them. You have all oil infrastructure in here get destroyed. That makes all the countries here weak, and it's great for Israel. It gives them dominance over the region.
About getting energy or anything else. They can take care of that for themselves. They're oblivious and unconcerned about everybody else in the world, about Africa especially, that could pay the biggest price, about Asia that's already paying a big price. Rationing is already going on, to include even in Australia. They don't care about any of that. They don't care about...
I do think one thing that's going to change from this is Asia, like even China, but Japan, South Korea, they're not going to be as standoff in the Middle East anymore after this war ends. They're going to be very keenly aware that Israel can start a war and completely fuck over their economies at any moment. And they'll be putting pressure and a lot of attention to try to make sure that doesn't happen again.
American nationalists, they sure don't care about the 13 Americans who were dead or the 400 that were wounded in the first 40 days of fighting. No, they're not concerned about that either, or the ones that would die if we continue on. They don't care about our 16 bases that have been hit. They don't care about the billions of dollars of American radar that have been hit. They don't care about all these planes that have been destroyed. They don't care about any of that stuff. They just want us to go back into war on their behalf. Now, of course, it's insane because they're foolish to the highest degree. It won't work. We've talked about that a number of times too. Even by loaning out...
Well, if a couple of 1,000 U.S. troops die trying something in Iran, that's fine with Israel. It's not Israeli troops dying. It's U.S. troops dying. And that's a sacrifice Israel is willing to make.
United States Armed Forces and handing it into the use of Benjamin Netanyahu and basically just saying, sure, take our armed forces and do whatever you want to along with yours. Because he could never do this war on his own. Never. He would never have attacked Iran if he had to do it on his own, because he can't. Then all the fire would have been directed against him, and it wouldn't have been dispersed around all these other places. It would just be all of the damage you've seen would all be on Israel. Of course, they can't handle that, and they don't have enough wherewithal. I think that I'm not sure they even have any of these transport planes that can refuelers that can get the distances covered to even use a lot of their air power without the U.S. So they can't do it. But with us, they can start it, but they can't finish it, and that's the key point we need to understand here. But now the question is, where are we going to go now? Because we're going to have to do something. It's going to get finished one way or the other, or it's going to stay some kind of a frozen conflict.
I say it stays a frozen conflict until the rest of the world forces Trump to surrender. And that's going to take at least 2-3 more months.
Because Iran has control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they are not letting it go.
And Republicans are completely fucked in the midterms anyway, because the damage just in the first 2.5 months is going to be enough for that, I think. But there's more damage on the way because Strait of Hormuz is not open for a while.
So for them to open it up is going to require something from us, or it's going to stay closed, or at least it's going to stay closed on our terms. As Foreign Minister Araghchi says, he's willing to open it up on his terms.
As far as we are concerned, the Strait of Hormuz is open, and all vessels can pass, except the vessels belong to those countries who are in war with us, who are fighting with us. The situation in the Strait of Hormuz is very complicated right now, and we are trying to help ships to pass safely. Everything would go back to normal once the act of aggression is totally and completely ended.
So, to recall, Strait of Hormuz was wide open on the 27th of February. There was no issue. There was no blockage. I think the price of oil was $60-something a barrel. A little bit hot, but not that much. I think it was 50-something.
We gave them control of the Strait of Hormuz. Without us bombing Supreme Leader, Iran never could have seized the Strait of Hormuz because there was deterrence. They knew that if they tried to seize the Strait of Hormuz, we'd bomb their Supreme Leader and kill all their leaders, and it was the threat of that prevented them from doing anything. But once we bombed the Supreme Leader, then those threats are gone, and they seized the Strait of Hormuz.
Earlier in the year, and because of the tensions that had risen up a little while, absent any of these tensions, it would probably still be somewhere operating in the $50 range. Obviously, quite a bit better than what it is right now. In fact, let me look at the live ticker right now. It's 105 at the moment. And that's, of course, usually by this time, President Trump has said something to manipulate the market to make it go down on a Friday. That's what he's usually good. But apparently right now, he got nothing.
I'm actually impressed that they have managed to control the price of oil for so long. They did the same thing 6 months back, the food prices back in 2010. And that's what created a huge spike in the price of wheat and stuff in early 2011. I figured that oil gets consumed a lot faster, and so their ability to keep prices artificially low would be limited to like 2 months maybe. But they're doing a good job of just keeping that cap, keeping it at 100. By releasing oil from strategic reserves and other reserves. But you can't print oil. Paper, you can release oil from strategic reserves and sell lots of oil futures, but once those reserves are gone, then oil spikes to the moon. That's what's going to happen.
So even he usually says something here, especially with the 10-year yield market. You've seen Robert Barnes on our show talk about that. That's usually a trigger for him to do something. And at least so far at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I mean, there's still time. The market's still open. So I'm definitely watching for something. His pattern has been to do something when the 10-year bond gets even near 5.5. And it's above that level. At least it was the last time I checked. So the oil is high and the 10-year yield is high. Those are things that he doesn't like. And so far, he's done nothing. And it may be because he can't do anything. And he realizes that to say anything now is going to be empty because no one believes it. Because even Sergei Lavrov, we're going to get to him in just a second.
And he wanted interest rates to go down, but that's now impossible with rising inflation.
Talk about, our allies. Well, there's in the region, they've been hit real hard because they listened to us and because we led them into a war that has harmed all of them. Now, the Iranian allies, primarily China, I'm not talking about the proxies, but I'm talking about the major ones of China and Russia, have been helping Iran on a number of cases. Well, now then, I think you see that China, a lot of people had hoped that when Trump went to China, he would be able to get them to help them open up the Strait of Hormuz and to get the war open. And all China said was, yeah, we'd like to have it end, and we don't think anybody should be charging tolls. And then that's it, just words. No action, no threats, no pressure on Iran to do anything that we've seen anyway. And certainly based on what Iran is saying, nobody's putting any pressure on them. Well, on the Russian side, Sergei Lavrov, talking about the Strait of Hormuz, points out the obvious.
we need to understand the root causes of every conflict, and we understand what is the root cause here: unprovoked aggression by the U.S. and Israel against Iran. Now everyone calling upon Iran and everyone else with this demand to open up the Strait of Hormuz. I would like to remind you that before February 28th, before the start of this aggression, there was no problem, or any problem with the Strait of Hormuz. The navigation was insured, safe navigation was insured 100%. So when this aggression against Iran was launched, the goal was clear. It was declared to put an end to the period of history where allegedly Iran instilled fear and terror into its neighboring countries. The same with the kidnapping of President Maduro from Venezuela when he was accused of drug trafficking. And then it turned out that the U.S. was not interested in drug trafficking. They were interested in oil. The same is here. They are interested in oil.
Now, listen, you may not like Sergei Lavrov. You may hate Russia. Fair enough if that's your proclivity. But now,
He does look very ghoulish, I must say.
Shaped by the Strait.
You may hate Russia. Fair enough if that's your proclivity. But his words are clearly accurate. The Strait was open before that. This thing, but President Trump himself loves to talk about how great our military is. Look what it did in Venezuela.
We accomplished nothing. We didn't accomplish regime change. We didn't get rid of their ballistic missiles. Now the Strait of Hormuz is closed when it was open before. And all our bases in the region were destroyed. Our radars were destroyed. We've lost a ton of aircrafts. I mean, any way you cut it, we are worse off now than before we bombed the Supreme Leader. And that isn't even begin to address the damage to the world economy that's still like snowballing. It's growing. Gas prices are just going to spike in the summer.
We did not conquer Venezuela. We had an insider deal and went in with a big show of force and a big splashy thing for TV so that helicopters could be cool with explosions in the background, all kinds of made-for-TV stuff, and it was made-for-TV stuff. We killed a bunch of their people. We didn't lose any virus because it wasn't a real engagement. It was all scripted and facilitated from the inside. That wasn't a great military victory. That was a great PR victory that ended up killing a lot of people. So the blood was real for their side. But there wasn't anything to it. But you see, it wasn't about drug trafficking. It wasn't about interdicting votes. That was all cover. It was all about, which President Trump bragged about incessantly after that and still does, about the Venezuelan oil. And you heard President Trump early in this war here.
Now Venezuela is in the same situation as Iraq. They sell their oil in U.S. dollars. It's kept at the U.S. Treasury, and U.S. Treasury decides if Venezuela gets its money or not. It's a great situation for the United States, and people in Venezuela who went along with it are basically traitors to their country.
In the first few days, I'm accepting nothing but unconditional surrender because he thought his military was that good. He thought it was going to be like Venezuela. So we said, unconditional surrender, that's it. And he said, we'll take their oil. That's what we're going to do. He said that early on. Now, he hadn't repeated that part later because it has dawned on him that, oh, snap, this ain't going to work. This ain't Venezuela. And we didn't have anybody on the inside here. And it's like, weirdly, their country is different. Their armed forces are different. Their religion is different. Their history, their geography, everything is hard. And none of it worked. So he hasn't said that part again. But he did, exposing his intentions. So that part is true. Now then the question is, though, where do we go from here? If you can't win this militarily, that we've proven so far we can't, and so don't believe any of this nonsense about 90% of their capabilities taken out and we shoot down 90% of the missiles, that's self-evidently untrue, then what do we do next? Now, there's really two options as I see it. One is that you can use diplomacy. And the other one is that you can walk away. I don't say the third one. I don't say military is an option because there is no option. You can blow up a bunch of more rocks on the side of a mountain. You can kill a lot of people in Iran. You certainly can because there's a lot of stuff on the surface.
Trump, if he wants to, he can turn the entire Middle East into wasteland. He can blow up all the oil infrastructure. I mean, he blows up oil infrastructure in Iran, and Iran blows up the rest of the oil infrastructure. Chain reaction. He can do that. And he's not going to surrender. I've come to this conclusion. Until he's forced to, until his arm is twisted and he's forced to recognize that he's lost. And it'll take the entire rest of the world working together, putting pressure on him for that to happen. And we are nowhere near enough economic pain in the rest of the world for people to grow a backbone. So the status quo endures. No oil from the Gulf for another 2-3 months until the rest of the world realizes we're fucked unless we force Trump to surrender. And then things get moving.
93 million people. You won't have any problem killing people if you want to, but it won't result in anything. So I don't even consider that one of the actual options. I just consider that one of the things you can do if you want to make things worse. But if you're looking to actually solve this problem, there's one of two ways that has some validity and possibility. One is through diplomacy. Now, that has some obvious requirements that you have to give as well as take if you want to have something come out of it. But there's a problem with that, and that is to even have an engagement where you have give and take. The other side has to have some level of trust.
Yes, that is trust is, of course, one issue. But the other issue is Trump is still pretending he's won the war, and he can't accept anything less than an Iranian complete surrender. As long as that's true, there are no negotiations. He has to stop talking like he won. He has to admit that the United States lost in Iran and start negotiating from that standpoint, and then negotiations have a chance. But Trump is never going to do that until someone, the rest of the world, puts a gun to his head and says, do that. And that's going to take time.
So the most important issue right now is the question of trust. We cannot trust Americans at all. So everything should be exact. Everything should be defined very clearly before we can conclude a deal. And it is obvious that those things they have not been able to achieve militarily, they cannot achieve on negotiation table, unless there is a win-win solution achieved.
So you see, even Arakchi, their foreign minister, still comes out and says, if there's a give and take, if there's a win-win possibility, and we have some reason to trust you, but we have none, folks. President Trump specifically has been getting. Now, he's not the only one. I mean, you can look at George Bush getting out of a lot of treaties. Barack Obama made some mistakes.
Iran also, what's not being spoken here, is it wants to establish deterrence. Holding the Strait of Hormuz closed like 5 months, they've established deterrence. They don't need any agreement from the United States. Deprive the rest of the world from the oil, from the Gulf, for 5 months, and there's so much economic pain from that no U.S. president will dare attack Iran again. It's halfway there. So that's another reason I don't see this conflict ending soon, is Iran is not keen, really, to negotiate at this point because they haven't sufficiently established deterrence. Once, I'd say 5 months, 6 months, somewhere around there, Iran will say, yes, okay, they'll be able to see all the economic pain in the world and say, okay, we've established deterrence. And so one of their principal concerns about guaranteed to not be attacked again, they will have fulfilled themselves. And so they will be a lot more open to negotiations. Combine that with the rest of the world pressuring Trump, and that at that point, negotiations are a lot more possible. But right now, we have a U.S. president that's not willing to recognize he's defeated, and Iran that hasn't yet established deterrence. And so a resolution of the conflict right now is very unlikely.
Joe Biden certainly did a lot of things bad. Didn't pay attention to the Afghanistan situation and some of the terms that we broke, as well as the way we got out of Afghanistan. It was a mess. But I don't think anybody is on Donald Trump's level. Going back to 2018, when he withdrew from the JCPOA, the nuclear deal, he assassinated one of their senior military commanders in 2020. And then all the things he's done here, Operation Midnight Hammer in 2025, and then now this war here, both of which were in the middle of negotiations. And then we attacked. And now here he is, because his hands are tied and he's out of options. He's asking to make a deal here. But it's like going to a car dealership and say, man, my car broke down. I need to buy a new one. I'd like that one because I would like to have.
Why are we talking about car dealerships now?
Car I'd like to have. They say, that's cool. Where's your cash? I'm just gonna finance this one. They said, yeah, your credit score is about 30. If you don't.
About the United States having no credibility in negotiations. Yeah.
Or around 700 pound sand. Just move on. Yeah, but I only have 30 because I defaulted on all my loans, but I really need this one. So I'll pay a little bit more interest rate in the banks.
But again, the fact that the United States has no credibility on their promises, that won't matter like 3 months from now, because Iran will have established deterrence on its own. It will have inflicted a cost on the world so great that no U.S. president will be excited about attacking Iran again. And at that point, once they've established deterrence, it doesn't matter even if the U.S. is untrustworthy. One of the things Iran wants, it will have already achieved. It doesn't need a promise from the United States not to attack again. It would already instill such fear in U.S. presidents about the consequences of attacking Iran that guarantee won't be necessary. And so negotiations just become more possible the more time passes and the more deterrence Iran establishes through its its blockade of the Strait of Hormuz.
It's going to say, do you think we're stupid? No. You either come with cash or pound sand, or go and rebuild your credit so that you can come back, and then maybe we can trust that you're going to repay the loan. That's what's happening here. We have the equivalent diplomatic credit score of about a 30, and you need a 700 to get this kind of thing done here, because we have methodically destroyed.
Also, if Iran manages to force countries to lift sanctions against them, like that's one thing the U.S. blockade, one thing in its favor, is without that, Iran would have more leverage. It would be forcing countries to lift their sanctions just through the control of the Strait of Hormuz. You want oil from the Gulf? Lift your sanctions on us. And now your ship's going to go through. That dynamic would help Iran lift the sanctions on itself. So ideally, probably the U.S. blockade collapses at some point, and Iran is able to use that dynamic sometime over the next 2-3 months. And then again, with that, if it doesn't need to ask for sanctions to be lifted in negotiations with the United States, because it's already forced them to be lifted itself, it makes negotiations more likely to be successful.
Our credit for negotiating an end. That's where we are. And now we're stuck because there could be a negotiated settlement, but they won't even entertain it because we have no credit and no trust. So what does that leave them then? That leaves them saying, we're just going to continue to hold on to this, which then leaves the only other viable path for the United States is the walkaway theory, where President Trump, and he kind of previewed potentially some of it in one of those earlier sound bites, in which he said a dozen times, more than a dozen times. We got the greatest military power. We destroyed everything. They have no Navy. They have no Air Force, and blah, 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 no air defense. And, Midnight Hammer, it'll take them 20 years to rebuild all this stuff. And if they do anything, we'll come back, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Trump walks away. Then 3 months from now, the rest of the world gets together and pressures him to come back. That's what happens. He can't walk away from this. The rest of the world and Iran won't let him.
That's what he could do.
But he can try.
Only thing that has any chance to solve this, because it leaves Iran in control of the Strait of Hormuz, and they'll keep it for a period of time, probably for a long period of time. Leaves them with their military capacity. Leaves them with their.
By the way, control of the Strait of Hormuz won't matter long term. Saudi Arabia already has one oil pipeline going from the east side of their country to the west, bypassing the Strait of Hormuz. If this ends with Iran controlling the straits, all these bunch of new pipelines will be built over the next 2 years, bypassing the strait, bypassing Iranian tolls. And so after that, the Strait of Hormuz stops being important because there's now, or relatively, there's still a risk of Iran bombing the pipelines, shutting those down. So yes, there's that. But in terms of just them controlling the strait, it won't matter anymore because the Gulf countries will be able to bypass the tolls through pipelines. That said, for those first 2 years before the pipelines are built, it will make bank on collecting tolls from ships going through here. And so that'll fund a lot of reconstruction.
With their speedboat navy still intact, it leaves them with their missile forces still fully intact. It leaves them with control and still access to their proxies, their regional allies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, etc. All that stays in power, and it keeps them in control of their reprocessed material, wherever that happens to be, and their reprocessing capabilities. Other than that, big win for the United States. So that's where we are right now. There are still those in the United States, however, especially in these upper echelons, and especially those who are tied to the Israeli side, who we already told you don't want any kind of a negotiated settlement. And I'm going to show you here a former senior NATO general.
That Israel won't matter. 2-3 months from now, when the entire rest of the world is panicked about oil prices and oil shortage, the rest of the world combined has far more leverage than Israel.
Admiral Stavridis. No, I'm sorry, this is Breedlove. This is a former Air Force general in the United States. Stavridis is similar to this. But Admiral Air Force
in the short term, next month, if there's going to be escalation, it'll be in the next month. If it doesn't happen, then it'll be too late. There's no point to it anymore. And during that phase, during next month, yes, there's still a risk of Israel doing something. So we need to get through that period, hopefully, without the Gulf going up in flames. And then we'll be all set. We'll just have to wait for another month and 2 after that for the rest of the world to put pressure on Trump.
General Breedlove is saying what so many others that we've shown in the past are saying, and he sees 2 options too, but his 2 options are a little different than mine.
I think that we have basically 2 choices at this point. Iran is exerting some amount of control of what's going on in the Straits. We obviously are controlling
more than some. It's near complete.
Much of what's going on in the Straits. It would be nice to further attrit their ability to control the Straits. And that's one love tap that could be considered. The other is all this time that we've had this quote unquote ceasefire.
Yeah. The United States snuck 2 ships through the Strait of Hormuz during the ceasefire. And the fact that it was a ceasefire made it easier because Iran is less gung-ho on attacking and breaking the ceasefire. So it was already under conditions where it was easier than normal for them to break the ceasefire. But none of that matters. Even if you weaken, if the U.S. attacks these islands, weakens the infrastructure, insurances is what's shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. It's a war zone, and insurers don't want to insure ships going through. And as long as you have weapons, this coastline chock full of weapons, insurance rates through the Strait of Hormuz will be unaffordably high, and nothing will go through.
Fire. Iran has been building back, and we know they brought up a certain number of their missile firing positions, and it may be the time to go back and revisit the catching up that they did during this time of no bombing.
When are you talking about a love tap and that they have been this so-called ceasefire. What does that even mean? This quote-unquote ceasefire. It's a ceasefire. We negotiated it. We're the ones that worked it out. So I don't know what you're doing, this air quote thing and this quote unquote doesn't make any sense. But it's one thing if I'm saying President Trump, I think has cognitive decline. I don't think he is able to have
No, I don't think that. I think it's just stress. The amount of stress he must be under is insane, and it's affecting his mental abilities. Yeah, it's no reason to look for something more complicated than that. He's tricked into this war, and his presidency is over, and he doesn't want to recognize that. And yeah, his weakened demeanor is, I'd attribute it to stress. He's nowhere near Biden's level anyway.
coherent, logical, rational thought process because he's declining in his mental capacities. But man, what do you say about somebody like Breedlove? Or about many of these other folks that are on major television networks that just incessantly say these things over and over, or like the Jack Kings, or Senator Grahams, or Mike Waltz, all kinds of these people. How do you account for that? They can't be stupid. In fact, Doug McGregor on a show this past week said a lot of these guys are not stupid. But how can you argue for something that is self-evidently untrue and can't work? Does Breedlove really think that if we go back and to do a love tap, whatever that actually means, and if he's taking something, his two options are either a little bit of kinetic or a lot of kinetic to set them back, oblivious to the result and the retaliation that the Iranian side were doing, which they are clearly signaling, as clear as can be. If you restart this war, we are going to take out the energy infrastructure of your allies. We're going to hit American bases. We're going to hit Israeli bases, and possibly even water these allies.
They have said, Iran has said, for every one target, one critical target the U.S. and Israel hit in Iran, they will hit 4 critical targets in the Gulf states and Israel. They have stated that. And so far in the war, they have kept the promise in terms of an eye for everything struck in Iran. So I believe them.
Colonization plans that many of these countries need to physically survive. Now, do you think that the price of oil is high right now? Because we've been, now weeks of releasing strategic petroleum reserves all over the planet, storage.
If things escalate, the oil that Saudi Arabia is exporting through their pipeline, and to the extent it's still happening through this other pipeline that by the Strait, if things escalate, Iran will just bomb the oil infrastructure itself, the pumps that draw oil from the ground. Pipeline won't matter anymore. You will have another, 8 million barrels a day disappearing from the world market. It will get, and you also, the prospect of not having any oil from this region of the world for years, oil hits like $300 a barrel. It's insane.
Facilities, but they're all running dry. They're all running out. Now, if you stop the flow out of the Middle East because you destroy or badly damage the oil infrastructure, guess what, folks?
And just for the record, $300 a barrel oil is about $15 a gallon gas.
Those numbers are going to skyrocket because now it's no longer a political decision. It's a physical constraint that can take years to do. And that year's process, by the way, won't even start until the war comes to some kind of an end. Even the strike itself wouldn't say now that we're talking 2027. We're talking that years-long process won't start until we...
Yeah, but there's always a risk of Trump knows he's going down as the situation stands. He might decide to take the rest of the world with him. Hopefully not, but you never know. Oh, it's a mess. Anyway, I think watching this video was a great way to overview on everything going on with Iran. Because of the trip to Beijing, there's been no activity. There's no way the United States was going to start anything while Trump was in China. Now, there's risk of escalation again. We'll have to wait and see. So, either things will get really wild really soon, or go in for the long haul. That means I'd say my estimate 3 months, give or take a month, and that's when serious negotiations will get underway. Iran will be more ready to negotiate, and the U.S. and the rest of the world will be desperate to negotiate, and that's my timetable. This ends in 3 months, give or take a month, if there's no immediate escalation. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch our Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.